Hi, I'm Helen Hardman, and for this project, I'll be discussing outsider art or art brut, which roughly translates as raw art. This project is being sponsored by Doncaster Council, which, despite Doncaster being a small town, actually has a thriving local art scene, especially with the advent of Doncaster Art Fair and the new D31 gallery space, which will be run by local artists, myself included in that. The reason I've chosen outsider art is because when I was ill with paranoid schizophrenia, I produced quite a bit of art that would actually fit into this category. So, to begin, outsider art is art that is considered to be produced by artists who have no formal qualifications, though this isn't always the case, as I will discuss an artist who fits into that category later. These artists, due to their circumstances, usually didn't or don't end up on the mainstream art scene. The circumstances may be that the artist is from a war-torn environment and is expressing how they feel about perhaps what's going on around them, or they may be institutionalised, or they may be a native artist, or even children's art can be considered to be outsider art. I actually myself don't like the distinction of self-taught artists as a term, just because I think all artists begin self-taught. That's how we discover we are good at the field, basically, and then subsequently get qualifications. The style of this type of art actually varies broadly because it's a movement. It's not a movement, should I say? It's a category, and it's important to me because there is a raw power to the outsider art. I've actually got a page on Facebook that shares pictures of outsider art, and they look much different to what you would find in mainstream galleries. This art began being recognised in the 1900s in European psychiatric hospitals, and the art was actually categorised medically more for the doctors to discuss and learn about their patients. And it was the modernist artists who were the first people to see the art as art for art's sake. In the 1940s, Jean de Buffet began collecting art made in unusual circumstances, which I guess would be considered one of the first collections of outsider art, and he considered the art to be more authentic and visceral than conventional art which hangs in galleries, and like I've just said, I would agree with this. And his particular interest was in psychiatric patients, the art of psychiatric patients. The English term outsider art was coined in 1972 by a man named Roger Cardinal, and the term has been expanded since to fit local history and religious or folk art rather than just psychiatric or spiritualist art from which it originally came from. The term is also used to describe nowadays art that is considered wacky and a bit out there, compared to what else you would find in a mainstream gallery. In fact, every year since 1993, New York has hosted an outsider art fair. Richard Dadd is probably one of the most famous examples of an outsider artist, with his major works being created while he was institutionalised, and he's most noted for his depictions of fairies and other supernatural entities. He would obsessively paint his pictures over and over. Like one of his most famous works, the Fairy Tale's Masterstroke, the paint is quite thick on it because of it being painted over and over. He'd fit into the category of outsider art as a trained artist who was later institutionalised, and the work he created while institutionalised would be his outsider art. And it was during Dad's travels around Egypt that he became ill and he believed he was being influenced by the sun god Osiris. He was brought back home and for respite, and was later believed his father was the devil and subsequently killed him with a knife. He then got away from that scene and threatened another person with a razor before being committed to Bethlehem Hospital, which is also known as the infamous Bedlam. And like I've said, his one of his most famous works is the Fairy Fella's Masterstroke, which hangs in the Tate, and he spent many years working on the piece. In 1922, Hans Princeton wrote Artistry of the Mentally Ill, which became an influence on the Surrealist movement, as Surrealists often explore the psyche in their artwork and dreams. Despite most outsider artists being discovered after death, there are galleries that are dedicated to their work, with the Henry Boxer Gallery in Britain being one of the famous ones, and it holds the work of the artist Louis Wain. And Wain started his art career, I suppose, producing anthropomorphic cats, which were to amuse his wife, who was dying of breast cancer. As he got more accomplished at creating his anthropomorphic cats, they started walking upright, had canes and hats and clothes, that kind of thing. But his popularity declined because he was popular in Victorian England, and he eventually fell out of favour, and his mental health declined as well. But as he got ill, his cats became less playful and more disturbed and abstract and quite terrifying, and people say that you can see the decline of his mental health state through his cats. I feel outsider art is an important art in its own right, because it represents the machinations of the mind when it's left to its own devices, without the need for praise or financial gain or the status that could come from being a famous artist, which is probably a good reason to call it raw. And now I'm going to show you some of my artwork that I produced while I was ill with paranoid schizophrenia, which would actually fit into this category of outsider art as well. So these artworks, I used to write I hate and I hate and I hate a lot. Because I thought people hated me when I was ill. They would be considered outsider art because I produced them before I was medicated with the paranoid schizophrenia. So they were produced in the height of my madness, as it were. I actually thought I was being spied on by the students at the university and with cameras, and thought I was being tormented, but actually I was hearing voices in my head. I thought I was being bullied, basically, in essence. Like I say, I was hearing many voices in my head, thinking people were spreading rumours about me and being particularly cruel about me. And the problem with this illness is it's a delusionary one, so you believe all these things really are happening, even without the rationality to figure out whether it's really happening. I think this one here is a good example of what I mean about raw art or outsider art, because I produced it obviously while I was ill, and I can never get when I produce these pictures with the words coming out of my head now, they're never as angry or as visceral as when I produced them initially when I was ill. I'm not sure if it's the quality of the paper or if I'm just not trying hard enough, but yeah, they have a certain anger and a rawness to them, which I think describes outsider art very well. This one is called We Are the Dead, and I used to draw poppies a lot when I was ill, actually. This one's quite poignant. Sanity is not statistical, is what the words say on that one, which is quite insightful, I suppose. This one I produced while I was highly ill, and I didn't actually produce it in a response to the voices, but I produced it as part of my art project and decided that I didn't like it anymore and never got it finished. But then now I like it. Now that I look at it, I actually like the flow of the colours. And I've produced artwork in response to the pictures. This is a modern one that I've produced that is in response to the artwork I used to create while I was ill. It's called 5, that one, because it's got 5 of the main voices in it. That little people in here represent the 5 main voices that I heard. There were other voices, but there were 5 main ones that had spread the rumours about me. And this is some art in response as well to the mental health art I produced. This is art that deliberately tries to recapture the sense of outsider art in its obsessive quality, the repetition, the dark kind of black ink. There's a lot of outsider art that's quite dark, so this art was actually deliberately meant to look a bit like outsider art, and also doesn't really have a meaning either, as a lot of outsider art, though it may have meaning to the people who produced it, the meaning's often unclear to people studying it. So thank you very much for listening to my talk on outsider art. Again, we are sponsored by Doncaster Council, and yes, just thank you very much.